John got an email to that effect.
Good morning, all. Welcome to the Public Works Committee. A little late, but we've got to get moving, get through this. This will be Parks and Recs Department right now, so I'll turn it over to the committee. Well, I need a roll call on the previous meeting. Anybody have questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? I get a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So, let's move to Jeff. Go ahead.
I'll move 3 through 5.
We didn't get there yet.
Okay, to start with, we'll have Justin Gagnon do an update, Saratoga North Creek Railway.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So our update for this month, we're 2 weeks into our Polar Express operations. Current reservations are standing at 19,000 with 21 operating days left to go. On the freight side, we're moving 1,000 tons of stone down from Tahaz this week. That'll be the final stone train for 2015. Moving into quarter one, our plan currently is to not operate any passenger trains in January or February. It's leaving March open for a decision, but that's our plan. Short and sweet, that's pretty much all I have today. Are there any questions?
Okay, quickly, Justin, just my own question, because I've been questioned by the snowmobile people, but you are going to use the tracks over the winter occasionally.
That's correct. There will be enough
All right,
operations on the line that would
All right,
need
so
for,
snowmobiling will be banned
Right.
from the tracks. Thank you. Now,
Yes, so when you're saying no passengers, there's no, what's it called, snow train?
Snow train,
There will
correct.
be no snow train to,
For January and February, at
January
least,
and
yes.
February. Thank you.
you have a question?
One quick question.
Just speak a little louder, I can't hear
I'm
you.
sorry. The question is there or is there not right now a official request to extend the agreement between
Okay, I can answer that question. You want to answer? I can answer that question. There is a small committee working on the contract for the railroad for the next 5 years, or whatever the case may be. We had a workshop on it, and we're going to continue working on it. But right
but
now,
there's no written request, the one that was due on June 31st hasn't appeared yet?
no.
Okay.
There's nothing official yet. It's just a kind of workshop committee and discussing some of the terms of the following year's agreement. And when we come up with a final, it'll come to this committee. All right, thank you. Any other questions to Justin? All right, thank you, Justin. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item, on page 1, resolution authorizing agreements with the towns of Thurman, Lake Luzerne, Horicon, and Hague, for snowmobile trail maintenance and equipment. Resolution on page 1.
On over. Matt, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Passed.
In page 2, resolution for Warren County Town of Bolton agreement for 2016 up beyond the support in the amount of $20,000.
How much?
20,000?
30, I'll move that.
As much as you want.
That's support from Bolton Landing.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
just want to make sure. Okay, Mr. Garrity, just stand by. You're making the quorum because one of our members walked out. So keep an ear open to what we're saying. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Conover, I'm assuming you made the motion.
I moved it.
You made the motion, you seconded. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any questions? Against? Passed.
Next item is a request to donate to Parks and Recreation from William Brannigan and family. Apparently they knew Bruce Roberts well, and he's a lifelong resident of, the reason is that they want to do that is because he was a lifelong outdoorsman and resident of Warren County. The pages 3 to 5 is the request, the location, and the resolution. And the location would be in Glens Falls off of Country Club Road, and it's for a concrete bench which they will install professionally.
Mr. Conover? Matt, is that, do I see a hand there for Matt? Okay. Oh, Bud, that's your hand? I'm sorry.
My hand.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed?
I assume we'll send out a letter of appreciation.
Yeah. We'll do that. Right, Jeff?
Next item in the referrals, for the stored cars, I should say, up north. I don't know if, there's been any information, that can be produced right now. It was going to the county attorney for his opinion on the contract.
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman, if you want me to report at this meeting, I can report at another meeting, whatever your pleasure
We might as
is.
well, we can make it, if you wanna report on that workshop.
Not even an issue.
I don't believe that's an issue any longer, based on my reading.
What's that?
I believe that,
They've withdrawn that
they've withdrawn that proposal.
publicly.
Um,
But I missed that.
Well, I think that we should get some further confirmation from them on that. We had are they not here anymore?
No, I guess not.
Fred would have that, but I'm pretty
I
sure.
mean, we had a workshop session with them yesterday, it came up during the workshop session. So I don't believe it's an item that is,
Pending.
I don't believe it's a pending item, but it's still an issue as far as legal review goes. It's still an open issue, and I think you should have the answer to that. I've looked at this as far as what the common carrier obligation is, for a railroad. Obviously, we received some correspondence from their attorney. I reached out to the Surface Transportation Safety Board. I have an informal opinion from that agency. And the common carrier obligation, an informal opinion, common carrier obligation is broad enough to include the obligation of a carrier to transport cars that are going to be stored at another location, over rail lines. The way that the contract reads now, except as otherwise required to comply, may not be the precise language, but it's good enough, to comply with their common carrier obligation. They do not need the consent of the town or the county to transport hazardous materials over the lines. So it would be the position of the Surface Transportation Safety Board that they would not require our consent.
Then, this begs the question, then why were they here?
I think they came here as a matter of information.
Basically, it wasn't really gonna, we haven't decided anything. The small workshop meeting was to discuss that and some other stuff in the contract.
Well,
so-
why were they here yesterday?
No. Why were they here
Today.
asking our permission in the first instance?
I can address that,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Ed made it clear from the start to me that they want to be a good partner, and they didn't want to just go do something without talking to us first. And they wanted, as partners in the operation of the railroad, they just thought it would be better to be upfront in terms of what their actions or planned actions were. And as partners, they don't really, I think the part of the issue is that working with government's different than working in private business sector. But I think they wanted to be, like I say, upfront, they want to be good partners, and initially I think they were thinking, hey, just say you don't have a problem with it. At this point, they understand the issues better, I think, and I think at this point, my understanding would be is that they still want to be upfront in terms of what their plans are, but that they, as long as they don't get an objection, I guess, from the county, then they're going to be fine.
Their position has been from the get-go that they are allowed to do this as part of their common carrier obligation. I think at the meetings that they appeared at some time ago, I think Mr. Ellis stated that. I believe Mr. Ellis stated that on the record. I could be wrong about that. It's evident that there is no specific case law on this, but by analogy, the Surface Transportation Safety Board would take the position that this would be something that Again, it's an informal opinion, but this would be something that would be part of their common carrier obligation to transport cars over a line to get to another destination. It's all part of the overall federal program of rail lines.
Our agreement with them has specific provisions relating to hazardous materials.
It does, but what our agreement says is, except as required to fulfill their common carrier obligations, they need our consent. So there's an exception. So basically it's this. It's federal supremacy that's at play here. So irrespective, I'm glad that provision is in the contract, but irrespective of whether that provision was in the contract or not, under federal supremacy, because of the federal law as compared to state law or our common law rights, they would have the ability to transport cars over a rail line if it is required to meet their common carrier obligations.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's probably a very accurate recitation of their position. My position is that unless and until such time as they've secured at whatever time they choose to move forward, appropriate approvals in appropriate counties and appropriate townships, and including the state of New York, we would be, I think, other than being notified that they're going to do it as you're indicating, I would want to see all of that in place first, prior to any action, even in an informal, yeah, that's fine, go right ahead, from Warren County. In other words, that I think that, we want the horse in front of the cart here. And I think that as the proposal is in another area, in another county, as I understand it, and in other jurisdictions, that may not be receptive to that particular use in their locality, not to mention the Adirondacks at large, and since I know there's a strong feeling in this regard, I would want to see all of that dealt with first.
Well, just, here again, I don't think they're looking for our consent, they're not looking for our, it's okay. I think now we're down to a point of, they may do it, and according to Martin, if I understand you correctly, that's their right.
Correct.
And so I just wanted to make sure you folks were aware of that.
Well, it's just, I believe the last time there was the resolution actually went to the board for an action, for a vote.
Correct, and that will not be brought back up.
I see, so that should not have happened, is what you're saying, is that didn't have to happen.
Right.
It's not that it couldn't happen.
It didn't have to happen, and certainly Mr. Ellis and his company knew that was happening. We provided Mr. Ellis with a copy of that resolution in advance of the board meeting, so he was fully aware that that resolution had come out of committee. I worked on that resolution, I don't remember whether he offered any objections to that resolution or not.
I don't think he did at the time.
So, but be that as it may.
Yeah, well, we didn't commit anything at that workshop, it's just a discussion, just so you understand that. And it was also, we had Corinth there and their representatives, and they also notified us that their town would have no problem with it. So, that was just so you know that. But
was or was not?
Would have no problem with it. So, but they're going back to their board to move that forward. We haven't moved anything. It was just basically a workshop and discussion and talking about some of the changes for the following year's contract.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry I was out. I don't know if the committee was informed, but the next step will be to present a contract to this committee for the renewal. That contract would be sent out well in advance of the committee meeting, and we would have to schedule a special committee meeting on this, just because of timing. It would be in our county's interest to do that, because we want to know if we're going to have a deal or not on the renewal. So I'd be recommending a committee meeting sometime before the January board meeting.
Monopolize things here,
No, go
but I
ahead.
just want to be clear in my own mind. So, what you're saying is that even if there was a provision within the contract that somehow limited or diminished common carrier responsibilities, that the federal law or the federal regulation would take precedent? Or are you saying that there being no specific language agreed to by the carrier, that having agreed to a limitation, so therefore there's no limitation? I just want to be sure I'm clear in my mind. Do we have the option within our negotiations to establish certain limitations in this regard?
Limited.
Limited.
Very limited, because I think ultimately if a carrier can bring forth evidence or demonstrate that this is a requirement in order to fulfill their common carrier obligations, I think your rights here as at the county level, the state level, are preempted, superseded, if you will, by the federal provisions. It's not to say that that provision that's in the contract now that says except, as may be required to fulfill their obligations, because if it's not a requirement to fulfill their obligations, they require your consent. And there could certainly be a scenario where they would want to transport cars with hazardous materials over the county line that is not required in order to fulfill their common carrier obligations. So I very much like that provision as written in the contract, and I'm not recommending any changes.
So there is, they don't require, the short is they don't require our approval, and we are limited as to what we can require in this regard.
Correct.
If I can mention one other conversation that did come up and only was talk, that 20% of the coal cars in this country are gonna be obsolete this year, comes 2016. So there's gonna be a lot of coal cars that could move along that line, empty coal cars. So, I mean, it's just something that, a lot of cars that are, in the way we were listening, just gonna be obsolete, and something has to be done with them. So, yes.
So the definition of obligations, is that a contract that they work up with whoever owns these cars? In other words, this company doesn't have a contract right now, hypothetically, to store cars. What defines an obligation? Is it a new contract with another company to take these cars and then to fulfill that?
I think you're onto it, Supervisor.
Okay.
I think you're onto it.
And I just wondered, I wanted to clarify, you said Saratoga or Corinth said they didn't care. What did they not
No,
care?
they didn't say that.
No, what
They
did
were
they?
in favor of it, but they had to go back to their board to make sure.
In
that
favor of
letting them go across
allowing?
the Corinth tracks, not
Okay.
ours.
That's what I was wondering.
Their section of track.
Clarification, that was it. That was good.
Those common carrier provisions don't apply to them? To Corinth? I was wondering why they had to go back to the board.
I don't think they have to go to Corinth. I don't think they have to. I think Corinth was simply stating, as I recall, and I believe what the chairman is saying, is that they don't have an objection to the use of the rail lines.
Right.
At least the representatives that were there yesterday.
That were there, right.
Okay. So that's my understanding. But I believe Corinth is in no stronger or weaker position when it comes to federal supremacy and the common carrier obligations than the county of Warren is.
I'm just wondering whether we should aim at strengthening our, as owner, our say in this regard. You're indicating that you believe, if I hear you correctly, that you believe the existing to the degree that it can, the existing contract does discuss limitations as it relates to hazardous materials generally.
It does. And I think those provisions are well written and are very clear. But again, I want to emphasize, if not re-emphasize, is that the exception, well, let me put it this way, the consent the requirement that they obtain the consent of the County of Warren and/or the Town of Corinth applies only when the transport of the cars is not required in order to fulfill the common carrier obligations. So in other words, if they have a requirement, they are a common carrier. They must meet certain obligations as a common carrier. One of those obligations, in order to ensure the proper use, the proper storage, the proper access of rail lines, not just in New York, not just in Warren County, but throughout the country, is that they must take cars for storage from time to time. That's part of a common carrier obligation, as I understand it. So as part of, to fulfill that common carrier obligation, they would have the ability to transport over lines in order to fulfill that common carrier obligation. If it is not required to fulfill their common carrier obligation, then they must obtain your consent, if there's hazardous materials.
Just to frame the question, to frame the issue, there are those, and sizable numbers, I think, in groups, that believe that generally the Adirondacks are not a place, given what the Adirondacks was established for and what we're looking to achieve in the Adirondacks, a place for such a facility, and have made their views known in writing and elsewhere. There may be those that don't consider it a big deal and frankly may not care. It would seem to me that to the degree that is appropriate, we should maintain within our contract the ability to allow those concerns to be registered so that a determination, if possible, could be made relative to the appropriateness of that. And that's why I said earlier that it would seem to me that prior to any action on our part, that the actual use, the actual depository, the actual storage facility, that those approvals would be in place prior to any approval that we would make. Now you're saying, well, actually our approval is not required. I accept that. That's the legal opinion, and it's a informed opinion. I'm just wondering within the contracts, so then the language we presently have within the contract, if we were to move to enforce that provision, that's what we would hang our hat on, is that provision within our contract with them, dealing with hazardous material. In other words, if you want the car,
adding that provision into the contract.
but you're saying it's already there on hazardous material.
Well, you're bringing in things about Adirondacks and environment and aesthetics and things of that nature that is not in the contract, right? What's in the contract is it says, except in order to fulfill their common carrier obligations, they need our consent. But if they need to do this, irrespective of whether they're making money on it, that's not the issue. I mean, the feds don't say you can't make money on this. If they're going to make money on this, and it's necessary in order to fulfill common carrier obligations with respect to hazardous materials, they do not require your consent. So I think that's the position, as I understand the Surface Transportation Safety Board, in an informal opinion, that's the position. If we were to ask for a formal opinion, it would take some time to obtain, but my understanding is that would be the sum and substance of the formal opinion that would be issued. So adding provisions about the Adirondacks, about what it was intended for, et cetera, might be nice, but I don't think at the end of the day any of that is going to be able to come into play when it comes to satisfying common carrier obligations, which is a matter of federal law.
Finish. Sorry.
It's clear as mud.
Clear.
Well, what's unclear?
Well, I mean, they don't need our permission, they did it as a courtesy to us.
Well,
didn't need our permission, they could've moved those cars without us ever knowing about it. And they did state to us, you know, the question was asked yesterday when I was here, I had to leave early, the question was asked, okay, we're concerned about the freight, the moving of freight on the rail line, that is still their intention to move the freight on the rail line in the future, cause they know that's the only way. But for them to come back and want this contract, I think they are getting close to getting, being able to haul freight out of there. But and what Gene mentioned, 20% of the rail cars, this could be thousands of hopper cars, coal hopper cars, they're gonna have to be moved somewhere also, because they're not gonna be in play anymore, because they're shutting down all the coal-powered, power plants, I believe, and that's what they also told us. I mean, we asked a lot of questions, Ron, about the oil tankers and where we could regulate, how we could regulate, and basically, it's a federal regulation that says they can move them. And I can tell you our partners on the rail line, which is the town of Corinth, they're very much in favor of allowing them to move the cars. And I don't remember anybody from the state level, the ATA or DEC, coming out and saying they couldn't put those cars on their own tracks in, near Tahong, I forget what county, Essex or, you know. But I don't remember any ruling from the state or anybody, they were kinda silent about it, right?
I think I just, I'm trying to remember, I just read an article on this, I think it might have been in one of the, monthly publications of, one of the, environmental groups, and, that dealt with, what they felt was the, conclusion, at least at this point in time, on the issue. I'm just wondering, they're coming to us, for a contract, for an agreement,
Right.
to do certain things. You know, at this point in time, I mean, we have someone that's interested in conducting that program that may at some point in the future be interested in doing other things. And I'm not sure what I think about those other things at this point in time.
The renewal clause says that they can request the renewal, a 5-year term, but it's on the same terms and conditions. Okay? So once you start talking about other terms and conditions, you have some more flexibility and you have some more leverage in your negotiations with them. So should they be, you know, should it get to that, when I think it will, you know, we can have some room for discussion with them. That's my sense. I don't know if anybody else here disagrees.
And just the only other comment I'll make is, you know, most of us are not realizing these oil cars are coming from thousands of miles away, so they're going over a lot of track. You know, you get to this area from someplace, so, this law kinda covers a lot of that track too, not only ours.
Right.
So it's just a thought, I mean, they're not just coming out of Saratoga. I mean, they're coming from out west and all over the country, basically, if they're gonna come. Travis, I think your hand up, you want a quick question? Hold on. Let me get Matt first, sorry. Go ahead, Matt. I'm
I
sorry.
appreciate the clarification, I mean, I totally understand it, and, I know for myself, I was just looking for an avenue that we could have a discussion about these potential uses. And I think that the issue with me is it arises because we were faced with a resolution, and I definitely have an issue with, you know, if I have a say in it, allowing something to go into somebody else's county, on somebody else's property. Cause I heard, you know, I work closely with Hamilton County, Essex County, and they were, you know, they were sitting back and trying to see what's really going on, but, it wasn't very well received, without all the information. But I have no say, so, at this point in the
Well, this one,
contract.
personally, I asked that, was hoping that we'd get some information
Yeah.
from those people. You know, it's, you know, we really have nothing to say against it because of the law of that going over our track.
I understand
But if
that.
they don't want them stored in Essex County, then they, you know, that's
It's their fight, I understand
their
that.
play.
But it stemmed from the resolution that we were faced with to vote on at a board meeting. That,
Which,
that was the issue.
which resolution, I just would remind everyone, had some very neatly tailored conditions about safeguards and follow-up and, et cetera. So, you know, we spent a lot of time on that resolution. Obviously, it didn't go anywhere, for the reasons stated at that meeting. But, you know, that resolution, I think, was tailored because of some of the concerns that had been raised, perhaps even some of the concerns from the neighboring county.
Yes, Mr. Travis.
Thank you. No, I would agree 100% with what Martin's saying about the federal common carrier laws, and that would be an area to leave alone. But this is a contract between Iowa Pacific and County of Warren. And as such, you could put any kind of conditions, other conditions in it, just as Martin had said. One of those conditions could be, we don't want you to use our tracks to store cars, you know, somewhere else. And if he's willing to agree to that, then he agrees to that. It couldn't stop, you know, CSX or somebody else from saying, I want to transport, you know, nuclear waste from here to Haas and back. You can't stop that, I agree. But you could, in an agreement between two parties, say, you agree not to use our tracks in order to put cars in storage up there. I think that's possible. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Mr. Chairman, and I've given, Mr. Whitehead, I've given that some thought. My concern is that, and while I ordinarily would agree with you that, you know, two parties can agree and reach resolution on issues, I would believe that Iowa or Saratoga North Creek Rail would have an issue waiving an obligation that they have under federal law. So I think there might be some resistance to that, because I think we would be asking them to essentially waive a requirement that they must meet as a common carrier, and I think they might be a little more than a little reluctant to do that. I'm not saying we can't discuss that with them. I'm just envisioning what their response may be.
If you fine-tune that just to say for the storage of cars, which is what people get upset about, if they're willing to agree to that because they don't think they're going to get any business there anyhow, which is what we've been told, then there shouldn't be a problem. But if they still think that, hey, yeah, we might be getting coal cars, we might be getting oil cars, and why else do we buy all that tractor? We're going to store them in the Adirondacks, which is going to make it look bad for Warren County, you know, when Hamilton and Essex start coming down on us. If you just excluded that one use of those tracks for that purpose, I think they can agree or they cannot agree. You know, it's their choice. And it would depend on how strongly Warren County felt about, you know, making this agreement work or not work. It comes down to being in your hands.
And real quick, I will apologize because I thought we weren't ready to have a committee discussion on this, and I would have had Ed and his team stay. I mean, I think the way we left it yesterday, we're gonna get back into.
Well, I think the problem is that as you get to item 4.
Yeah, well, that's what you know.
You know, it says, and here I am, and,
But it also says provide an update from the committee, to the committee, and we don't have enough, didn't have enough information.
I think it's okay to, in my view, Mr. Chairman, I think it's okay that we're having this discussion.
No, I think it's a great discussion, don't get me wrong, but I would probably rather
Just would put one
have.
other thing on the table for everyone to think about here, and that is that, this is a major, putting the environmental issues and concerns, off to the side just for the moment, and they're significant, I do believe. And if we focus on the economic, the idea of the partnership was, to benefit both parties. We are the owners of a major piece of infrastructure, which includes not only the rail lines, but the culverts, the trussels, everything. Everything has a life expectancy, and there's going to be a cost eventually to the county for that ownership. And part of the business plan with these folks included freight. Now, if we have an agreement that is void of other profit centers, profit elements, then we should plug that hole and we should do it immediately, particularly if the profit center gives us nothing and reduces the amount of freight and the revenue from the freight that we might achieve.
Okay, I'll let the administrator, I
Yeah.
mean, there was a lot of discussion, and I learned, I think we all learned a major...
Well, I did ask that question.
Go ahead.
And it is clear to, Iowa that this would be considered freight. So as a result, we would get our percentage on, not only on the, transportation over the line, because it is considered freight, we would also, it would count towards, there's a provision in the contract that once you get to 100 freight cars in the previous year, they have to pay us $5,000, I forget the month. It would trigger that clause too, so they did agree that that would, because that was my concern is, and you had previously raised it, is do we do this for nothing? And we don't. And they would agree to clarify the contract that that is in fact the case.
We're going to need to have, Paul, some analysis as to what we envisioned our revenue expectations, our hopeful expectations were on freight against the, what might be an unavoidable other use that we're powerless to do anything about. And so the new agreement, I think, is going to need to have provisions, not only relating to this particular item, I don't mean it that way, but these types of items. Otherwise, what ends up happening is we start getting cherry-picked in terms of our possible revenue centers, profit centers, and we find ourselves in a situation where we have the continuing responsibility and the liability, financial liability of these assets without a growing revenue stream.
Okay, Travis, one more
Point
question.
of clarification, I don't know if I just heard Mr. Dusick right, are you saying that they would consider the storage of cars as freight, and therefore we would participate in some of that gain?
No, not the storage, the transportation across our line, and then the contract says once they transport so many cars, we get an additional revenue. So that was geared, those clauses were geared with the assumption that they'd be hauling freight over our line, and we'd get that additional revenue. And what they're saying is that we'll treat these cars going over your line as if they were loaded with freight. We would not get any part, to my knowledge, and the way I understand the contract, and also Martin was there and the chairman, but to my knowledge, we would not share in whatever revenues they earn as a result of the actual storage itself on their own line.
Thank you. And
Unless our agreement spoke to that.
Right.
Unless our agreement spoke to that.
is that meeting taped?
No.
No, it was just a workshop.
See, that's my point on the agreement. Unless the agreement spoke to that specific provision that there needed to be a negotiation relative to that. Again, the point being that if we're not doing that, then we're not capitalizing on all possible revenue streams to support what's going to be an increasing cost of this infrastructure. That reserve account that we set up, if that's not growing, significantly growing, because we have other responsibilities, then we simply don't have the sustainability. I mean, to me, that measures the sustainability going forward, right? You have X millions of dollars worth of infrastructure, they have life cycles of Y, you have to have an annual revenue of Z to be able to sustain it. Pretty simple, I think, when you come right down to it. So if our reserve's not growing and significantly growing over the years, then there's going to be a significant, surprise, unpleasant surprise on down the road.
Anybody else? All right, so let's move on then.
Last item, number 5, just to let the committee know that we received an award letter from an annual application that I do to the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation to support the snowmobiles in 2015-16. It was 72845. just slightly up from last year, which was about 67,000. And these monies go directly to the clubs.
Need a motion on that to accept that money, right? Or is
No,
that
no,
that's
just
general knowledge,
information, yep,
okay.
just update the committee.
And the last one, privilege to the floor, anybody else have any other questions? All right, we'll move right into DPW then.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. On the first page, on page 1, is a request for a new contract. This is for an annual contract that we have for testing services. Our last one had expired, so we rebid it for lead and asbestos consultant services. And it's a 1-year contract, extendable for 2 additional 1-year terms.
You wanna,
I'll move the first two, please.
you wanna do the first
Two
two?
contracts, 2 new contracts.
Everybody in favor of that? A second? Got a second? All right, any questions? Motion on the first two, 1 and 4? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
On page 9 is a request to apply for a New York State DEC grant. This goes hand in hand with the household hazardous waste contract, item 4. And our next step is to apply for a grant. They require a resolution passed by the board. You'll see that sample resolution in the packet. And that'll allow us to apply for a DEC grant. We can, along with our contractor, and we can get a grant that will cover up to 50% of the cost. There is, for household hazardous waste collection days, there would be other expenses that, as of right now, would be passed on to the actual users and resident participants. We don't have another funding source for that other 50%, but our goal would be to get that 50% and then come up with a fee structure that would cover the remainder of the 50%.
Nat,
I'll move it.
second. Mr. Conover.
I had a question.
All right, question.
Is this for the whole county, or is this just,
Yeah, the concept that we had was to do 2 collection points, one in Queensbury and one in Warrensburg. And they would be open to the full county. There's some details that need to be sorted out on how we control access and how we certify that these are county residents and not, people coming down from Essex and over from Hamilton and across from Washington County. So there's some details to work out, but we would do 2 main sites, and we think Warrensburg, as we discussed in one of the committee meetings probably a few months ago, is a good central location for the county. And then with the population centers in Glens Falls and Queensbury, town of Queensbury has done collections at their town hall facility, and that's a suitable paved area and large enough to accept another collection site.
is there any thought about, is there a maximum amount of money on the match? I know it's 50%, but do we know what we're getting into as far as the cost of, what it could cost the county?
Kevin's been working on this for a while, so he's been using some examples.
We don't know that yet. Basically what we're gonna do right now is work with Chair Environmental, we use the contract out to this committee, to put a plan together to come up with those numbers, and typically what it would cost. They know the size of the area, they've done this over and over again, so we would sit down with them and plus sitting down with them, we have to put this plan together to go through, get approval with DEC. So, until we put that plan together, we're not gonna have.
We'll certainly be back to committee with more details, because there will be some risk going
Yes.
forward, and we may end up bringing more in fees than we otherwise needed, and maybe we start a fund that will roll over into the following year and offset some of the costs. We may end up with expenses that we aren't able to, recoup in fees, but that's part of the fee structure thing that's gotta be worked out in details now that we have a contractor selected, and that will be done as we submit to DEC for a grant.
I think it's a great proposal.
Our hope is to get that work done, early winter, and then achieve a grant for the spring and do a spring cleanup.
Most of the town of Queensbury has done this in the past, so they themselves have reasonable costs, they know through the years how many people typically come to the event. We're not gonna know that for, let's say, Warrensburg, we're gonna have Oregon, Bolton, Luzerne, everybody's gonna, so, we don't know how many are gonna attend. They're gonna give us sort of a ballpark figure of what they think it would take.
I've just, with the experience with the TVs, we are bursting at the seams with TVs and can't get rid of them. And, it just took one public acknowledgement about these TV things. And I think we've probably gotten from Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, wherever, so.
Well, we're aware of those issues, and
Yeah.
so it's, you know, part of it's we're gonna need a commitment from the towns that wanna participate in this to provide some staff and assist, because, we certainly can't absorb all of that. And the towns all have systems in place already for their waste stations and for their transfer stations, so hopefully we can come up with a plan that will allow, residents or even property owners. We have a lot of seasonal property owners that, you know, with summer homes that have, I'm sure in their basement, a bunch of stuff from over
Yeah.
the years. And do we wanna allow them, you know, with a utility bill or with a property tax bill, you know, the ability to bring that, so.
And Mr. Chairman, and I would add that I think many people would be happy to pay the fee, because right now they just don't know what to do with it. I get calls all the time, I've got the following, what do I do with it? I wanna dispose of it properly. And those that aren't as concerned, they're simply not as concerned, and I don't know if this program is specifically directed at them, although it might have that residual effect. But, you know, everything you take out of a waste stream is that much less that's been put into the environment, so.
There would be a list of certain things that we can and can't take. I mean, a perfect example is, there's numerous people who bring latex paint. Latex paint is not something that needs to be disposed of as household hazardous waste. You open the can, let the paint dry, throw it away in the garbage. That's one of the things that, and we've heard this to the other towns that have done that. They've got loads and loads of people bringing things like that they're not gonna accept. We'll send it back with them.
Mr. Chairman, did you have your hand up a few minutes ago?
No, I just said, you know, I've done this, we did a hazardous cleanup at International Paper when the mill shut down, so, you know, I think we spent $10,000 on cleaning up airsoft cans and stuff, and I've seen this done. I mean, it's a good process. I agree, it takes it out, and, you know, we're more than willing to use our location on Route 9 as one to, help out with this. I think it's important, and then we should develop a program every 3 or 4 years to do this with everybody.
Okay, we had a motion, we had a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next, 3 resolution requests, 13, 14, and page 17, all refer to, transfers, interfund transfers for road projects. This is our final accounting, applying our labor, out of our maintenance code and our equipment, out of our maintenance codes to the specific road projects.
Mrs. Taylor?
I'll move all 3.
All 3. Mr. Conover, second. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
On pages 18, 19, 20, and 21 are increases to capital projects. These are all established federal aid projects. The first 2, we have our federal aid grant in hand already. The second 2, H364 and H65, we're awaiting those federal grants. These increases are to move local match monies out of, our existing transfers to capital project fund to fund these projects for the anticipated local match. And then hopefully, DOT will get us the grants agreements for the other 2 here soon.
Mr. Conover? Matt, second. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
On page 22 is a request to amend a resolution 418 of 2015. This was a resolution that, did not come through committee, it went directly to finance. It relates to a, combined effort with, Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District, and DPW. They received a grant to purchase a vacuum excavator, and, apparently the original resolution request had some errors in it, and so this one on page 22 would correct those errors. On page 23 is another related, resolution to authorize intermunicipal agreements with Soil and Water and with the, various municipalities in the county that would wish to participate in, use of this, and it would be a shared service, of, you know, if they need that vacuum excavator, they would schedule it, take it, use it, and bring it back, and, this would just authorize those agreements to be in place.
Mr. Conover? Do I get a second? Mr. Taylor, any other questions?
Just, what a remarkable organization they are.
Now, will the other towns, though, have to make an agreement with them to use it, or is it just all covered under the one?
One resolution, authorizing all of the intermunicipal agreements. You know, I think there's highway law in place that really supports that as well. So I don't think that's a big deal, they just have one resolution.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
I have three, intent to backfill, requests on page 24, 25, and 26. Each of these have gone through review of HR and civil service, county administrator, and budget officer. And, one is for assigned maintenance worker. I have, employee retiring end of January, so this will allow me to start a interview process and likely, promote somebody. The next one on page 25 is for a heavy equipment operator. Again, this is an anticipated retirement, coming up January 9th. Again, this would allow me to promote someone. And then on page 26 is a auto mechanic position. Our machinery shop has been functioning well. We've held one position vacant all year after consultation with the budget officer and others about trying to, operate, more efficiently. And, we've brought on some good staff there. That position has been vacant. I have another employee who's out on long-term, disability and not anticipated to come back, another mechanic. And then I just had a, third mechanic resign and take a position with DOT just down the road at a significant pay increase. So I'm currently vacant 3 mechanic positions, and, this is a request to fill one. And then, as I discussed with county administrator and my shop manager, Dan Smith, we're gonna see how we do into the winter, whether we can be down 2 mechanics, from prior years. But this is to fill one of 3 vacant mechanic positions I have.
Mr. Sokol? Mr. Conover? Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a request to, go into executive session to discuss personnel matters specific to.
Skip 23?
What's that?
Did we skip 23?
I think we took 22 and 23 together, didn't we?
Okay.
22 and 23 were together, right?
I'm not sure we should
That
I
was
check
don't think that
vacuum
was a
one.
motion.
that. There's no motion on which one?
I'm sorry, she was asking you about executive session. You need a motion to go in
I'll
executive.
make it.
Right. And a second? Conover. We're in executive session.
To reimburse, 2 employees for an accounting error in which they should have accrued additional vacation hours, to the equivalent value for, employee number 11097, equivalent value of $428.37 to be paid out of our, highway maintenance code, salary code. And for employee number 5804, in the amount of $3,718.40 to be paid from the, highway maintenance salary code.
A motion on that? Mr. Taylor? Conover? Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. What else we got here?
Okay. Now we're back on to just, on page 2. I mentioned earlier the 2 pending agreements from, DOT, and we've been working with them. If I get those, I'd like to get those, executed through the board, so those might be out of committees. We're anticipating, we're working with them, but it may not be until, after, into 2016. The next item for discussion is an item that, county administrator asked me to put on the agenda. Paul had sent me, the table on page 27. Had been some questions that had come up regarding the fuel farm land leases that the county holds with 5 different townships. There are 3 other fueling sites that are on county property, but these pertain to the ones that are on, town properties and what the basic, terms are. And, in speaking with the county attorney, some of these contracts are much older than others. Some have been updated, and others have not. And, there's certainly a desire from the county attorney to consolidate the general terms of these and make them consistent across the board. Just the legal terms, there wouldn't be any operational impacts or any, changes other than just the general terms would be, cross-leveled and, consistent with all of the towns. There was one question regarding, electricity payments. So that was for the town of Horicon, and it does say specifically in the county, in the contract that the county does not pay the electricity or other charges. You'll see 3 of these contracts, we pay a flat rate of $1,200 a year for the lease, and then on a couple of them, it appears we don't, and that we actually pay some electricity costs. Incidentally, the two bottom ones, Hague and Bolton, are the 2 above-ground storage tanks. Horicon is above ground, Luzerne and Johnsburg are below grade. The Johnsburg one is co-located, we're co-located with our highway, crew, our north end crew is co-located with the town crew there. So that one certainly has a direct benefit to the county DPW.
I'm all for standardizing, but I have to say that, it's also a wonderful thing to have it.
Oh, yeah.
To have the, fuel there and to be able to utilize it, particularly in emergency conditions. Like a hurricane comes through and you lose your power, of course, the DPW has backup power, you have the ability to deliver fuel. So there's a real plus to having it as well, so I think I'm all for standardizing it, but I don't know that, look at the benefit, the cost and the benefit, I think that there's also a great benefit to go along with fuel farms at your location. I just state that honestly, I don't know about.
No, I agree. I think it's good for our DPW. The schools benefit, the EMS, I mean, the fire departments, they all,
Cars, yeah.
you know,
School,
so.
EMS, fire, police, even the police use it.
Yep, sure.
If they need
Nurses.
patrol.
Standardize at $1,200, including electricity, whatever's appropriate.
Right.
But I don't, just speaking for, myself, I'm happy to have it.
And I don't know what exactly the request related to put this back on the agenda. I think there was the one question about the
Oh, yeah.
electricity. And then in the process, Martin had indicated to me that he'd like to clean up the legal language because they vary so greatly, and he wants to make it one consistent. It's really up to the committee if you wanna change any of the key payment and responsibility terms. That's up to the committee, or they can stay the same. It's really up to you.
I had asked only for, I knew that a lot of these contracts like ours is originally done in 1996. And it's never been changed. That's a long time to not reevaluate a contract. The newer contracts are 5-year leases. The town can terminate and the county pays the electric. That really seems very simple to me if everything was standardized to that same thing. I don't know if 1,200 is positive or negative, but I assume that if these were brought up, my contract was decided in 1996, that it probably doesn't reflect any, I don't know how it was arrived. But I would think that you'd wanna make them all consistent, one way or the other.
Does Hague and Bolton get any money, or they just get paid for the electric?
No, just the electric.
They just pay the
So, I
electric
mean,
and it's there.
I can imagine electric, I mean, that's $100 a month. Probably
Probably at
pretty
least.
much a wash between the 1,200
I'll
or the
bet it
electric.
is. I think our feeling, again, was, we're happy to have it.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be
There's other I mean, the town also maintains those.
maintained, we plow it,
You
yeah,
know,
that's
along,
same with us.
except we plow and we have to meet the fuel trucks. There's an incidental.
Okay.
I'm not saying that no, don't get me wrong, Jeff. You
Yeah.
guys, if there's a problem, you take care of it. But what I'm saying is, it's a shared responsibility. You guys own it, but it's shared. I'm not looking to,
But if over time you wanna standardize to a lump payment as opposed to not having to deal with the administrative on the electrical.
Yeah,
however
That way
way you
you
wanna
don't
do
even
it.
have to deal
I
with the
I think that's
electrical.
easier personally.
It's just, flat $100 a month, boom, done. No one even has to calculate, you're not devoting any staff time to.
Oh, I bet you it's a little bit more than that $100 a month. I mean, with the light, like, we have lights over it all night long, you know, and everybody uses it. It's just, but, I mean, I'm not saying it's
Well,
bad, but one of the others.
Frankly, I have no preference at all. It is,
Flat fee is probably easy,
It's-
you don't have to calculate the electric on a
Whatever-
separate
whatever you
bill,
guys want.
you know.
That's what I mean, the other thing is too, we also pay a charge on the fuel that we use. That's
Oh, it's not
paying for
free.
these. It's not free.
No, no, no.
Yeah,
No, I don't want anybody to
No,
get
and it's-
that. We're
well,
16 cents a gallon, right?
But at some point, I may be back to committee to show you the numbers and how the numbers, that 16 cents a gallon, gets burned up a lot in staff time and you know, filter replacements. And the intent of that, when we increased it some time ago, it was right after the county bonded $300,000 for fuel system upgrades. And we said, all right, well, upgrades are gonna be occurring every 10 years or so on these systems. And we tried to increase it with the intent of, establishing a reserve fund. That reserve fund is not growing anywhere where we imagined it would be. And, we may be to a point, at some point, where we're left with a major upgrade on a tank system and we don't, and we're back to, the county's back to bonding again. So, I don't think even the 16 cents is really covering that reserve, buildup that's gonna, it is covering our operational costs plus some that's going into the reserve, but it's not going into the reserve at a rate that is gonna allow any significant upgrades in the future.
That's something we should look at. I mean, it's everything needs to be looked at. It's not just take one piece and change it and not, you know, if you got below ground tanks, you know, there could be costs down the road that we don't know what it's gonna cost.
Well, what's the consensus? Wanna just recommend the
I
one
mean,
flat fee, or,
I mean, from my perspective, I mean, for the time being, I just would leave it in
or leave it
your
as it?
hands, in Jeff's hands, and if you think you wanna standardize going forward, if that makes sense, fine. There's efficiencies in that regard, but I don't know that any municipalities are looking on that. That's what this is about.
No.
This is,
No. It's a great convenience for us too, let's face it.
I'm not sure if Martin would be requesting a resolution authorizing the county attorney to review the contracts and standardize to consistent language. 'Cause typically, it's a renewal, meaning is as is renewal, or if there's a term that's changed, we do an amendment letter or something like that. I think Martin would want some flexibility then in a resolution authorizing him to standardize the, agreements to a consistent legal language.
I think we could give him that,
Keep it term.
as a board, give him that, and when we had the meeting, in a
And
couple
then in the
weeks,
future, we can review the payment terms.
right?
If anything, it'll
It'll be one or the
be
other.
more efficient. You won't have a new supervisor like me asking questions about a contract from 1996.
Yeah, the same with mine, look at mine, when I.
It'd be easy. Everybody's got the same deal.
But, okay, I mean, I think we're all in the favor of agreement, we'll leave it up to the attorney, and if he wants to keep it at a flat rate, we're all happy with that. If he wants to go with the X amount for electricity, we're happy with that too, right? As long as it don't go below the 1,200.
right.
I don't know,
All right?
I think Martin's gonna say, well, what do you guys want? 'Cause
Well, then you tell him,
he's
Jeff.
certainly the expert on the legal terms, like, there's a lot of language in them that are just, like, some of the older contracts don't have the current, you know, indemnification language, and, you know, all the legalese that most of us kinda skim over. I think he wants to consult.
I would do away with the, at these levels, in these dollar amounts, I would do away with the staff time to have to calculate the electrical and then
Right.
send it through the various approval processes and whatever. If at least if it's a flat $1,200, you know, it's on autopilot. And there isn't, you don't have that staff support that's required.
Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this a question that should be brought from the floor at the board meeting? Because all of the supervisors will be there for their respective towns. So, I mean, if it's minimal discussion, maybe we just bring it up at the board meeting.
Well,
and
not
vote on
every
it.
town has the,
Oh, not every, oh, okay.
No, they all use it, but this doesn't impact their usage fee, that's the 16 cents per gallon.
Gotcha.
whatever.
I would agree with, Mr. Conover. I mean, you know, the, $1,200 and I would like to see I'd much rather not have to sign a new contract, get it back to the county attorney every year if we could do a 5-year contract, if that works.
Okay.
So it's
That-
just the 5 towns?
It's simplest,
It's just those 5 towns?
yes.
Okay.
So, 5-year terms,
5-year term, clean the language up.
$1,200 per year. The
That's
local municipality covers electricity costs.
Yes,
Well, that's what we're getting the
That
1,200
makes it
for,
easy.
basically.
yeah.
I mean, we don't wanna charge
Basically,
it.
what Luzerne has, right, that's what Luzerne has, that's,
Right.
yeah, that we're
Except
getting.
they're on a 1-year now, that would go to 5-year.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, this less paper you're pushing is such a minor thing. Spending as
All right,
much-
so we got a motion.
More money pushing the paper.
Make
Yeah.
that motion.
Conover, second. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Alright. So the last few items. Kevin, you've been patient, you wanna talk some? You've been here, you wanna brief the committee on these?
Yeah, let me look at the I can,
Here's the photos, why don't you come up here?
first one will be the Westbrook parking lot. We just finished the parking lot, actually the contractor, Kabricki, just finished the parking lot last week. There's a few minor items that they need to, clean up in the spring, which we didn't want to do this year, which would put in the extra meters, lamp posts, some plantings and such. But pretty much that parking lot is all set and ready to go for the spring. The next one, actually, I don't think is on Jeff's agenda.
That one, just to remind the committee, that Westbrook parking lot is the porous asphalt, it was about a $700,000 grant
$700,000.
achieved.
Correct.
And involved, expansion of, that is an expansion out to the limits of the county property. We've maximized every inch there. It included some at-grade crossings and some work on the Ped Bridge, right?
That is
Part of
correct.
that.
Yeah, that part of it's not complete yet. That'll be next spring as well. The next one wasn't on Jeff's agenda, but, and everyone's not here either, the Valley Road project, which was one of our federal aid projects. Originally, if you recall, we did the Combs Road Bridge, which was, the town of Thurman's bridge, so that we could use that as a detour, so we could build this bridge. Actually, today, they're opening up, Valley Road, so that project is completed, so.
Do you have a big bridge party, when you open these up?
No, we will though.
I'm looking
We
forward
will
to
though
one
in
in
Oregon.
Oregon.
Okay, we will have
It'll be
one.
on me.
Our next one would be back to Sodom, that's a full replacement. We did do one in, Johnsburg on
That's
the
true, we did.
Chathamack Road Bridge.
Well, we all have
We
to go,
opened it,
we
we
all have
brought
to
our
go
gas
up.
grill right out and had
We'll
it
do the one on Market Street.
Okay.
We will have to
Not
have a-
everybody-
Hosted by the town, that's
The
great.
Not everybody
Appreciate
knows
that.
where
Appreciate
Chathamack
it.
Road or the bridge is. I do.
We'll do it after 3:30.
The next project is just one of our last paving projects for the year. This is Lampier Road in, Stony Creek. We had done the bridge deck over with a
Membrane, it's a
spray-on,
polypropylene
yeah, a
membrane.
spray-on polypropylene membrane to keep the water out of the deck. And then after that, we had gone through and paved, this portion of the road. The next project, and getting into that spray membrane, the next project that we did in-house was the Back to Sodom Bridge, up in Johnsburg. We have gotten to the point as of last week that the bridge deck, precast panels were placed. We don't have time to put pavement on it this year or this, membrane. So next spring, we will place the membrane and then pave it, and that project will be complete. That was done, not necessarily the design in-house. We had LHV, who's the vendor for the precast, and Contact, vendor for the steel, designed the bridge with our parameters, our requirements, and then we built this bridge in-house. We did all the work in-house.
This bridge was on schedule to be complete, and then, when the steel came, there was a fabrication issue where some of the diaphragms that goes between the main, girders had been misdrilled. So had we not had that, 3-4 week delay?
Probably almost a month, yeah.
Yeah, had we not had that, we would have been complete and that would have been done and open. But that threw us just that month, that extra month into a point now where we don't have the temperatures to do asphalt or the membrane.
spray-on
So we're
membrane.
better off leaving it closed. We'll complete it in the spring.
And the last photos that I have here is for Mr. Simpson's bridge. There's no bridge there yet. We've received bids so far on the steel as well as the deck. But we're working with our term agreement consultant engineer, Spectra, to do design on the abutments and wing walls. There's some design work that needs to be done before we can put the bridge in place.
No, please.
That's correct. A bridge too far?
Hard to believe that span,
Are you guys finished?
The only other thing I have is just the FYIs on the reports, the fuel and overtime reports included in the.
All right, so then I'll make a motion to adjourn?
Just one thing,
Oh,
Mr.
go ahead,
Chairman.
sorry.
I know it's been long. I would ask that, we consider, we had gentlemen come before the board that, with public bidding, for, private paving. And that kinda got me thinking, 'cause we do our own paving and I think overall, I think we do a pretty good job. But I think that it's a big county and with all kinds of changing weather conditions and all kinds of situations. And it occurred to me that it might be a good thing if we went out, prepared specifications this winter and went out for bid for private paving, and maybe we put specifications together for driveway work. 'Cause on occasion, we get into situations where it's late in the year, we're, now maybe we would utilize those, bids, maybe we wouldn't, they would be there as for us, should we elect to wanna call upon them. And quite frankly, the towns would be in a position, with piggyback provisions, to be able to call upon, those, bids as well. And I just put that out there, just, that doesn't mean that we would necessarily remove ourselves from what we do, but just as kind of as an add feature. We might find ourselves in a situation where, perhaps we do 9 out of 10 roads, but we elect to have the one road done privately for some reason. Or, and so in turn, we might find ourselves in November trying to finish our work where we got 6 driveways. And rather than pull our crew out, that might be finishing up on one end of the county, we just ask the privates to go in and take care of it. Just kind of another tool in your arsenal, should you elect to, use them. And so too with the towns could elect to use them as well. I just would put that out there as food for thought. I don't think it would be awful hard to put those specs together. I don't think it would be hard to get it out on the street, get the bids in, and frankly, what we do with it, or what the towns do with it after that is up to the towns, it's up to us. It's just another feature to what
We do those, under a heavy, highway contract, term agreement. I don't know that we have the piggyback provisions in it, but highway law allows me to basically do work and back charge the town, so I think we have those.
We have,
In fact, we used it a couple years ago. We split our paving crew, and we augmented our paving crew with another paver and some contractor operators. And we had 2 paving crews running at the same, concurrently.
and would you, that being the case, could you make sure that the appropriate piggyback provisions are included in that as well going forward?
Sure.
And I would only register the same comment I've registered for the past few years on our painting contractor and the performance requirements of the painting contractor. I think that some of our finished roads are going far too long without getting the stripes painted, because he hasn't quite moved his way back through this part of the country again. And I think that while it might affect the price, I think there should be a performance standard there, that within so many days upon notification, they've got to appear and do the striping, whether it's a county road or a town road. I don't like these roads going unstriped for extended periods of time. If there should be an accident or something on that road, you know, that's gonna be the first thing they're gonna point to, is the fact that the road's pretty
I think we discussed that too, adding like a, short notice provision or small, small quantity work.
Good.
Because we are bidding that as a bulk of work, we do it twice, and then oftentimes we have them come back a third time to do just a little bit.
Right.
But, I understand what you're after, and we can work that out.
And that original contract, Ron, that he was referring to, that was, original contract for heavy highways was for emergency services, but then the following year, I think after we had it for emergency services, which was 2011 when we had all the washouts, then we initiated a heavy highway, not just for emergency, but for regular paving use.
Term agreement, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
All right, motion adjourned?
Oh,
What,
we have solid waste item.
solid waste item, go ahead.
Here's the agenda. We have a bid on the electronic recycling services due on Thursday in order to implement this, before, really, we might not meet again. We're gonna meet specific on railroad stuff in January, but we won't meet until end of January on everything else. So I talked with Julie Butler earlier, today. Bids are due on Thursday. She'd like a resolution authorizing award to the responsive bidder for the electronics recycling services.
We rejected the other one, so
Right, this was where we rejected the other one because there was a problem with the bid where they said, well, I can't do that, and I can't do it like they had bid originally. They essentially retracted their bid. So I need a resolution authorizing that.
then you're authorizing Julie also to reject the bids that come in,
I don't know if we can
please.
do that.
Award or reject?
Award or
We can have that
reject,
language in or
can't
no?
do that? Huh?
I would say this, why
We rejected
don't
the
we
former
just
one, but
agree?
we rebid it to this.
Right, but we rejected the last bid.
Yes, right.
Rather than award on a bid that we haven't seen, why don't we just as a committee agree that you can pass
Bring it up-
this committee?
bring it up at
and
the
go-
meeting?
And go straight to,
Finance.
straight to finance. That would be all right.
I agree on that.
Because,
That's right, finances next
Yeah,
week
yeah,
anyway.
exactly.
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's do it that way.
Right?
Motion adjourned.
Okay, thanks. Good job, Jeff, thanks.
Jeff, good job.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Right.